p.m. My name is Rob Hall. We welcome you into the program. The Gardener's Corner is presented today by South Boston Memorials and T.G. Brooks Company. Should you have the opportunity to send some business their way, please convey a word of thank you to both South Boston Memorials and or T.G. Brooks for sponsoring the Gardener's Corner program. I'd like to make welcome all the way from the North Carolina Cooperative Extension Service, the horticultural agent for both Person and Granville counties, Mr. Johnny Coley. Good morning, Johnny.
Good morning, Rob. Good morning.
Glad to have you with us today.
Yeah, good to be here. Good to be here.
And for those of you that are maybe joining in on TV Channel 10, we've got the new logo from the North Carolina Cooperative Extension Service. Their motto is empowering people, providing solutions, and they do just that. If you're ever in need of assistance from the North Carolina Cooperative Extension Service, all you have to do is ask for it, and they will gladly oblige you and help you in any way they can. And the biggest majority of their service is a free service, although they do have a few little things that they have to charge for. Now, when you talk about soil testing, there's no charge for that, but if you ever want to have your pond water tested, or maybe you've got an aquatic plant that you would like to have identified that they can't identify it in the office, it can be sent off, and for a small fee they can identify that. And maybe if you wanted to have some of your hay checked for more or less nutrition levels, it's a small charge for that, but all of these monies that you spend is there to help you, thrive and do better and know what you're working with.
Yeah.
And Johnny, something we had talked about on the last show that you were on, about when you get out and decide to spray weeds and things, the first rule of thumb is know the weeds that you're trying to kill.
Exactly.
Because if you don't, you maybe will be wasting money using a chemical that may not even kill the weed that you're wanting to kill.
This is true. Yeah, you need to make sure you know what you're trying to spray. You don't want to spray a broadleaf herbicide on grass, because it's really not going to do any damage to grass. And a lot of the broadleaf weeds that do come up, poison ivy, morning glory, honeysuckle, things like that are fairly vigorous vines, the earlier you can get them, the better. Saying that now in the middle of the summer doesn't mean a whole lot, because they've already grown and gotten pretty good size. But if you can cut them down to a size, and then when they first start flushing back out, hitting them with the herbicide is the best time, because that is the best way to kill them. When they get a little bit bigger, they get a little bit more resistant, they don't take up the herbicide quite as well as when they're young and at a newer growth stage. So it's always better to spray, especially hard to kill vines like the honeysuckle and the poison ivy and the morning glory. Morning glories, they're pretty when they're blooming. They can be considered somewhat of an ornamental, but if they're growing in the wrong place, which is the definition of a weed, any plant growing in the wrong place is a weed.
That's
an oak
right.
tree in the middle of a tobacco field is a weed. So
I didn't know the meaning of a weed until Paul Westfall, the director of the Cooperative Extension Service of Person and Granville counties, made me aware of the meaning of a weed. And but yes, when the plant is young, it's a lot easier to control than after it gets in the maturity state.
Yeah.
We are live in the studio today. If you've got a question for Johnny, just give us a call, 336-599-0266. Again, that's 336-599-0266. 0266. We're going to be talking about a wide variety of topics today, one being composting, and it's several different ways of composting. Some of it is maybe you doing it on your own and letting Mother Nature take its course. And then it's other kinds of composting. Now, Johnny, you have told me the type of composting that you call it when it's done with worms. But if you would pronounce that name, because if I pronounce it, I'll just butcher it up.
It's vermicomposting.
Vermicomposting.
It's V-E-R-M-I composting. Verma being another word for worm.
Right.
So and we I did a talk over in Oxford Wednesday afternoon, and about the composting. And it is something that a lot of people are interested in. You can. It's a good way to get you a good soil, a good amendment to put into your gardens, to put around your trees when you're planting your trees, to mix in a little bit with your soil, to amend the soil a little bit. It just makes a great amendment to your soil by doing composting. It's very, very easy, and a lot of people think, compost, you got to have this great big pile, you got to turn it, and turning it does help, but there's a lot of very simple ways. At home we just do our table scraps. Anything other than meats, you don't want to do any meat products, but anything that you have, banana peels, apple peels. This time of year, watermelon. I've had my probably fair share of watermelon this year. Not quite a hope. I hope I have some more. But
I love it too.
Watermelon rind. That makes. Of course, we usually give it to the chickens, let them peck out what they can, and then we put it on the compost pile, which don't leave very much, really. If you think the chickens will almost eat everything but the peeling.
Eggshells will work. Coffee grounds.
Yeah, leaves. And in the class, I asked the different participants of what type of things you could put in there. So I'm going to put you on the spot today, I guess, and just ask you. You're going to be a one-man show here as far as what you can do. Grass clippings, and really every time we mow our grass, we're doing a certain amount of composting. If you're not bagging it, the clippings go on the ground and they decompose, and it builds the soil. It's a very good way. The grass clippings is a very good compost. It builds up the soil, but you can also collect the compost. Even if you are bagging, you can collect those clippings and put them in a pile, and that have a compost pile that way. So grass clippings, any kind of vegetable waste you can use for composting. Some people don't like to use the and I know a lot of sweet corn's beginning to come in now, but sweet corn, the cobs take a little while to decompose, and that something like that might not be as suitable for a homeowner compost pile, but they will eventually decompose, and a certain amount of them will decompose. The outer part will decompose pretty quick. And you mentioned coffee grounds. Coffee grounds is actually a good source of nitrogen, so you can add nitrogen to your compost pile by using the coffee grounds. Eggshells. You mentioned eggshells, a good source of calcium. It's works real well. Chicken manure, any kind of manure, horse manure, cow manure, any kind of compost like that will work on your compost pile. Chicken manure is usually pretty high in nitrogen. It's usually pretty high nitrogen content again, so that getting nitrogen into your compost pile, that helps. One other thing that chicken manure is usually high in is weed seeds. So you have to be careful of putting too much maybe chicken manure in your compost, because weed seeds can be an issue. I know one time I was part of a organic versus conventional gardening type experiment, and the people that did the compost or did the organic part, they used chicken manure for a source of fertilizer, and they had a lot of weeds coming up in there when you use that. So it's a good compost, but just being aware of the different things. And on the slides that I showed, I put up the chicken. You can do chicken manure, but you don't want to do chicken. You don't want to compost chicken.
No kind of meats.
No kind of meats or dairy products normally. cheeses and things like that. That attracts animals, mice or something to your compost pile. So you don't really want to do that. But any kind of vegetation, vegetables, any kind of waste like that works real well. So that's just as far as what you can put in your compost pile. Is any organic matter like that?
Yeah. One thing, a lot of people are already getting homegrown tomatoes, and you may have already planted some late tomatoes. But one thing that is not suggested when your tomato plants quit bearing, and if you are, raising tomatoes in a raised bed, when you clear the bed out, it's not a good idea to use the old tomato plants in your compost pile. Now, if you've got a field of tomatoes and you disc them into the ground, that's one thing, but old tomato plants is not the best to put in a compost pile because it could carry over some disease. And a lot of people have the more or less tumblers or roller compost containers. You don't necessarily have to have that, and you could take some cinder block and kind of set up a little perimeter to have a compost pile. And just every now and again you need to go out there with a shovel or a pitchfork and just kind of mix it up a little bit, and more or less the compost will go through a heat and it will just kind of decompose. And something else, you don't have to, but if you have a little bit of 10-10-10 fertilizer, you could throw a little bit of fertilizer in your compost, and this sometimes will help speed up, it more or less.
It'll add nitrogen to and a lot of times, and the carbon nitrogen ratio is something you want to keep an eye on. If you get that off too much, usually you want to around a 35 or 25 to 30 carbon to 1 nitrogen ratio as far as in your compost pile. If you get too much carbon in there, and carbon can be sawdust like wood chips that haven't been decomposed, just sawdust, can be a high carbon, and that can really throw off how fast your compost will decompose. Putting nitrogen out there and nitrogen in the form of blood meal. Blood meal is a organic form of nitrogen. Nitrate of soda is like 16% nitrogen. I don't know if you can buy ammonium nitrate anymore. That's like 33%.
Yeah,
but that's
I'm not sure either.
High. But a nitrogen source helps to keep that carbon nitrogen ratio in balance by doing that.
Something else about when you have a compost pile, it's a good idea if you could have several different stages of a composting pile. And what I mean by that is you don't want to keep adding to the same compost pile, because it may come a time when you're wanting to transfer some of the soil out of the compost pile and go ahead and incorporate it around your plants and vegetables, to where, if you've got stuff that you have just added to the compost pile, it probably wouldn't be the best. So if you've got a couple of different compost piles in different stages would help. And, Johnny, said something about, using chicken manure in your compost pile. You can use that. Cow manure and horse manure is fine. But the only thing when you use fresh manure in a compost pile, you need to make sure that it is kind of more or less broke down and decayed and dissolved before putting it directly around any kind of plants, because with the moisture content, and especially chicken manure, it'll more or less burn it to death.
Being high nitrogen, it'll burn it. So you have to be careful with raw manures. But if it's composted, gone through, like you said, a heat, and the temperature is critical in the compost pile. We mentioned the weeds that might be in the chicken manure. The temperature can be a good way of getting rid of those weeds. Usually you want to keep a temperature around 140 to 150 degrees. That kills most of the pathogens and the weed seeds. So you mentioned the tomato plants, and you're right, tomato plants, especially any diseased plants, you need to be careful about composting, because that pathogen can stay in the compost, and you can put it around with the plants, and all of a sudden you're spreading the pathogen or the disease from one plant to the other. But getting the temperature of the compost up to 140, 150 degrees, that'll kill a good amount of the pathogens and most of the weed seeds. Now, it's not going to kill all the weed seeds. Oxalis is, if anybody has grown a whole lot, they know oxalis is a pretty prevalent weed, even in potting soils. Potting soils, right out of the bag, a lot of times will have the oxalis seeds. It's hard. Evidently, it needs a very high temperature to kill that. So,
well, Johnny, now, so it would be good to have a soil thermometer for your compost piles.
Exactly.
But now, I'm going to ask the crazy question.
All right.
How could you raise the temperature of a compost pile? Lay a piece of plastic over top of it?
You can get plastic if you pile it up. A lot of times on a nice cool fall day, we haven't had a nice cool morning in a long time, but they talk like next week, and they're going to be in some 60s, and you turn that pile or pile of mulch or something, and you see that heat coming out.
Right.
Usually if you've got a good balance of the nitrogen, if it's breaking down, it's creating heat. And so if you've got a good balance of the nitrogen carbon, you're going to be able to raise that temperature up. And like I said, 140, 150 degrees. If you get up to above 160 degrees, you start killing some of those microorganisms that are actually good for breaking down and causing compost. So it's a balance that you have to.
So typically, the soil will get close to that temperature and stuff from the decaying process without you having to.
And if it gets too high, you might need to spread it out a little bit so it's not quite as much of a pile. And a good, I've been in some of the box stores, and you see a compost starting kit, kit for, that has microorganisms and everything like that to start a compost pile. If you get a good shovel full of good topsoil and throw in a compost pile, that's got all the microorganisms right there that you need to get started.
Now, so I've never seen that. And, one thing, pretty much anything that has moisture in it, if you pile it up in a pile, it will, what you say, go through a heat. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when people bale hay or roll hay, that is one thing you have to kind of be concerned about, is the moisture content of the hay, because when something is compacted really tight, it really has no way for the heat to escape. And so that's why it's really important to where, when hay is baled, you don't want the moisture content too high, because it can actually, overheat. And I have heard of, sometimes if you put it in a barn too wet, it will start to smoldering and would catch on fire. So it's really interesting the way that it works. But I have been told that when hay is in that state, that it would take a ton of water to cool it off. But the best way, and it's really not an easy way, is you have to get air to it and let air just kind of get air to it to where it will will
Either
cool
that
down.
or smother it, take the air away, because there's three things that a fire needs: is heat, air, and fuel. So if you take one of those three away, and that'll decrease it. Actually, if you have a big compost pile and you think it is maybe a fire with underneath it, if you have to be careful of turning it, and this is a huge compost pile like they would have at a landfill or something like that. Most backyard compost piles are not going to get that hot. They don't have that big of a pile for compost. But in big, and even in sawmills and things like that, they have to be careful for piling up too much sawdust. It gets so much heat in there, and all of a sudden they knock it back and they get a little air to that heat, and that fuel's there with the compost. You can have a fire. The best thing to do is just let it smolder, and it sort of just goes out. But it is a concern. But if you, like I said, backyard composting, usually a fire is not a big problem. But if you do see the temperatures raising up, above 160, you want to maybe spread it out. Don't have it quite, so much, or have put a little bit more moisture in there, and that'll cool it back down.
Well, I was going to ask, is it a good idea from time to time to maybe take the gardening hose and put water in the composting pile?
You can, if it's a real dry material that you're putting in there. Usually, if you're turning it and you're always adding things to the compost pile, but if you're turning it, you've got some moisture there. Normally not, but if it's a lot of dry leaves, like in the fall, you got a bunch of dry leaves to start the process, wetting them down. If it's outside, it's going to probably rain on them at some point, so that usually works.
Well, Johnny, when you talk about vermicomposting, and that's using more or less worms to assist, I know a lot of people has been out in the yard and maybe walking across the a concrete driveway or something, and after we've had a pretty good rainfall, you'll see earthworms kind of crawling across the hard surface. And a lot of people say, well, it rained and the worms came in from the rain. And actually what it is, when the ground gets saturated, the worms come out of the ground, because they can't survive.
They can't handle so much moisture, especially if it's a heavy soil, because if it's a real heavy soil, the earthworms aren't going to be there anyway. It's always been the old adage, if you have poor soil, if your soil needs aerating, or it would be good to add some earthworms. If earthworms are not there naturally, then adding them, they're not going to stay there. They're going to leave the area. So you have to amend the soil. You have to get the soil right before the earthworms are actually going to stay in the soil that you're dealing with. But it's always good to have earthworms in the soil, because they add nutrients. They break down anything that's in there that it is organic. They'll break that down, and the worm castings that they leave behind is always a good. And they aerate. There's some aeration that goes on. With the worms.
Well, Johnny, you just took the word out of my mouth. I was going to ask about worm castings, and that is just the excrement from the actual worm.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
It's a very good organic. And if you ever tried to buy any at the store, it's very expensive.
Oh, really?
It's good to have the earthworms and the vermicomposting. Because if you have worms in there, you're going to have worm castings. So they'll be in there and adds to it. So, any organic that you can add, or any amendments you can add to the soil, is always good. Usually organic type fertilizers, you mentioned 10-10-10 a while ago, which is only a synthetic. Usually if you're looking at a organic fertilizer, it's going to be lower in nutrient value. So anytime you can add, any kind of compost or organic matter with a little bit higher nitrogen or higher nutrients, not just nitrogen, but nutrient value to the soil is good. It's always a good thing. I think wood ash, like from the stove, you can actually put that in the compost.
Well, Johnny, I'm glad you mentioned that. I've had someone to say that it's good for wood ashes to be put in a garden spot and kind of tilled in. And I have heard someone say that if you are going to put your wood ashes more or less into a garden or a compost pile, that you don't want to have the wood ashes setting out to where they will, say, get wet until you get the container full and then you empty it. I've been told that you're better off, if possible, to store them in a container that they will stay dry until you can incorporate them into the soil. Have you ever heard any difference about that?
About the wetness and the dry. Most wood ash is going to be, and it depends on the wood, but it's going to be around a 20% calcium. So it's going to be higher in calcium than anything else. Potassium is the next, but it drops down to like 4% in the potassium level. But calcium, most all our lime is going to have calcium in it, and when lime raises our pH. Did I say that right? Yeah,
that's
raises
right.
Our pH.
That's right.
Sulfur and calcium, but calcium raises our pH. So if you've got 20% calcium in the wood ash, and you have if you just put it out on your lawn, or put it on your garden, or put it in your compost pile, it's going to raise the pH. So if your pH is already, right about what you want them, 6.3, 6.4, and you start raising it up much more, you have to be careful with that. So that's the main thing with the wood ash to be. I haven't heard of the wet versus the dry.
I don't know. That's what someone told me, but I'm not sure. And a lot of times I think people tell me things just to see if I believe them. And something. Here it is, the end of July. August 1st will be this upcoming Tuesday. And now is the time, if you hadn't already done so, you should be taking soil samples of your cool season grasses. And again, it's a good time to be, doing a lawn survey, to where if you do the survey and you kind of determine that you've got more unwanted weeds in your lawn than you actually have cool season grasses, what you should do is within the next couple of weeks, maybe start in a couple of weeks, to go ahead and spray your whole lawn with glyphosate, and I never say that word correct.
I suppose that's good.
Or the trade name is Roundup. But before you do so, you should do a soil sample. But after you spray to kill all the vegetation in your lawn, after you receive the results back from your soil samples, go ahead and put that recommended amount of fertilizer, nitrogen and or lime that is needed, and then you till the soil up. Well, somewhere about the second week in September is when you need to plant your cool season grasses. And the reason that it's suggested to plant cool season grasses, in mid-September, is it gives them the opportunity to germinate and come up before leaves start to fall. Because if you wait too late to plant your fescue, if you have a lot of leaves, when they fall, they will more or less choke out whatever fescue you may have. But need to get your soil samples, and that is one service that is free of charge through the North Carolina Department of Agriculture. And you just have to more or less take a soil sample, and typically you need about 8 ounces of dry, debris-free soil, and you take it up to the local Cooperative Extension Service office, and you'll have to fill out a little bit of paperwork, and they'll take care of the rest, meaning they will get the soil sample to the North Carolina Department of Agriculture Research Station, and hopefully within, 8 to 10 days, you'll have the results back from your soil samples. And whether you're doing your soil samples for your lawn, your raised beds, fruit trees, field crops, or whatever, it's very important, to use this free service. Now, this service is only free between like April 1st and Thanksgiving. If you wait until after Thanksgiving up until the end of March, it's a $4 charge per sample, so you can save yourself a little bit of money. Let's get a word on for T.G. Brooks Company, and when we come back, Johnny brought a sample for show and tell, and maybe we'll be able to get Kilby to get zoomed in with the camera to get it on screen, that way you can kind of see the sample. And by the way, those of you that listen in on the radio, we do our best to so-called paint the picture for you. But if you do not have access to our TV Channel 10, that's on Channel 191 on Spectrum, you can log on to RadioRoxboro.com to watch past editions of the Gardener's Corner program. But right now, we'll take a trip down to 411 Helena Marai Road in Timberlake and stop in at T.G. Brooks Company.
Two things are important to a lot of us here in Person County. Number one is getting those delicious vegetables and pickles put up for the winter. Whether you grew them or bought them at one of the two farmers markets, T.G. Brooks has your canning jars in half pints, quarts, half gallons, and they have the pressure cookers and canners, bath canners, strainers, funnels, in fact, all of your canning supplies. They offer the stone jars for pickling, too. The second item is keeping everything green, and T.G. Brooks Company can handle all kinds of watering needs. First of all, they have sprinklers, water hose sprayers, and water hose parts. They have irrigating equipment. T.G. Brooks Company also has your piping for irrigating. They have gas-powered pumps. A reminder, T.G. Brooks has Bartlett Animal Feeds, and they have dog fences and famous Pride dog food by the bags. Also, it's time to beautify your property while you're outdoors. They offer so many kinds of mulch in bulk form or bagged. You can get your mulch by the large scoop. They have delivery services also available. Bring your truck, trailer, and they'll load it up for you. And when it comes to yard tools to do the work, they have your hose, diggers, choppers, and everything you need to beautify. Be sure to enjoy the day with your family by ending the day with a delicious hand-cut ribeye steak sold and cut to your width, and cook it up on the grill, and then ice cream made with a White Mountain ice cream freezer for these hot days. T.G. Brooks Company has served the farmer, homeowner, and landscaper in the area since 1936.
All righty, here we are back on the Gardener's Corner program, and it's pretty much show and tell time. Johnny, if you would hand me the container right there.
All right.
And what he is here is more or less fishing worms, so to speak, and this is contains 30, how you pronounce that? Bicentennial?
Red wigglers. Red wigglers.
Yeah.
That spells red wigglers.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sure.
All right, anyway, it's like a, look at that, Kilby, man. You were good with that camera.
Wow.
That right there is big red worms.
And then we got the worms.
Yeah, and then Johnny has emptied the container, but these right here can be used as fishing worms, but they also work good, in composting. And now you ought to see the way that some of them are jumping. And Johnny, if we had a pond close by and a fishing pole, we could maybe have some fried fish for supper.
Yeah.
But these worms can help get into the soil to help aerate the soil and just really help out the composting process. So whenever you see earthworms, they are vital to help out with
and in the composting arena, red wigglers are what you want to use. You don't want to use the night crawlers. Night crawlers won't handle as high of temperature as the red wigglers. The red wigglers
okay.
will. The red wigglers, and you can't. We've gone off, but there we go.
Yeah, anyway, we're having a little technical problems with the video, but anyway, Kilby done a high-tech zoom in, but now we just can't seem to get the camera.
We look better like that, though.
Well, but you know, Johnny, I've said this before, you know, I have the face that is made for radio.
Yeah,
but anyway, so it's a lot of little things that you can do, and you know, who knows, maybe if you did get you some red wigglers and put that in your compost pile, you know, when you got ready to go fishing and needed some fishing worms.
That's a plus for having the vermicomposting, is having a steady supply of fishing worms.
Yeah.
And it takes about 1,000 worms to break down half a pound of food scraps per day. So if you had 1,000 worms, half a pound of food scraps they would break down per day. So they're pretty hungry little critters. Of course, this is 30 in this container here, so 1,000 would be quite a bit. You wouldn't want to probably buy them. And the way I did this, I think these were like $3.50 for the container.
Right.
1,000 would be fairly expensive if you did it that way. If you could find a worm grower or something like that that gets you 1,000 of them, and you know, I think it's about 1,000 and a pound of worms.
So again, to reiterate, if you're going to add any worms to your compost pile, use the red wigglers and not the night crawlers.
Exactly. The night crawlers don't handle the higher temperatures that the compost is going to create. And the worms, the red wigglers will not tolerate 140, 150 degrees. They
right.
want 70, 75 degrees, about as high as they want to go. But vermicomposting is a little bit cooler type of composting because you're not dependent on that heat to break it down as much as you are. The worms are actually going to be eating your compost.
And the beneficial part is the worm castings.
Exactly.
So,
the worm castings will be in there with the with that. A little bit of a problem some people have is separating the worms from the compost. So you sort of have to dig through and sort of try not to get the worms, you know, in your compost when you go to use it in your garden or something.
Well, it's a program that I haven't seen recently, and it still may be on, but it's used to be on the Discovery Channel, and it was Dirty Jobs. And the host of the show, his name is Mike Grove, and he would travel around and work with people on their everyday jobs. And there's a lot of work out there that is very hard, very messy, dirty work. And he would feature people, and he would just kind of, you know, wear their hat, you know, for a day to do different things. And everything from working on a dairy farm to working in a sawmill to a auto salvage recycling yard. But he did do a show one time that, and it was people that, how they made their living was, you know, selling fishing worms.
Yeah.
And the way that they would have to go through to cup the worms and things like that. So it's really amazing, Johnny, the way that the society is about certain jobs that people do to make a living.
Yeah.
But pretty much what it's all doing, it's just kind of a revolving circle to where, you know, everybody, you know, hopefully can find a little glitch that they can, you know, make a living. And then with the money that they're earning and spending into the economy, helps out other people. So money is not meant, well, it would be nice if you could just, you know, make money and just store it up and never need it. But money is made to be spent.
Yeah.
And
right.
it
makes
takes
the whole economy to go around. Sure.
And it takes a lot of different kind of people to do all these different jobs, but But again, if you would be interested in starting a compost pile, this something can be done very simple, and it could be very beneficial. If you would like to contact the North Carolina Cooperative Extension Service office in your county, you can request a publication on composting, and it can either be sent to you by U.S. mail, email, or you can drop by your local office and pick up a hard copy of it. But it's a lot of useful hints and ideas that's free and available from the North Carolina Cooperative Extension Service. All you have to do is let them know that you have interest, and they can aid you in just that. They sure can.
And having two universities behind us, you mentioned, we try to provide solutions, and we do. So we don't have problems, we have solutions kind of motto. But having two universities behind us really helps, because there's lots of experts that we may not know the answer, but we've got specialists and experts that do, and so we can tap into their knowledge.
Well, John, I'm glad you mentioned that, and of course he's talking about A&T State University and North Carolina State University. So got the power of two universities backing them up to assist. Hey, let's get a word on for South Boston Memorials, and we'll be back to wrap up this edition of the Gardener's Corner program. And we do appreciate you tuning in. But we'll take a trip over to South Boston and stop in at South Boston Memorials, located 1439 Seymour Drive. South Boston Memorials, located 1439 Seymour Drive in South Boston, Virginia, has been in business since 1958. The Myers family of South Boston Memorials believe that every life has a story. For 4 generations, their life work has been to present and preserve that story for our prosperity to hear. Allow South Boston Memorials to tell yours. South Boston Memorials has granite memorials, markers, and mausoleums, over 300 in stock. In-house laser etching is available at South Boston Memorials, and they can also make pet markers. For memorial benches, vases, and monuments, call on South Boston Memorials at 434-572-3859 or visit their website, sobomemorials.com. That's 434-572-3859. South Boston Memorials is located 1439 Seymour Drive in South Boston, Virginia. Like us on Facebook or visit the website sobomemorials.com. All righty, here we are back on the Gardener's Corner program, and while we was taking a break, we was talking about the sample of red wigglers that Johnny brought in, and we got to talking about how if we could go and take them for a swim, we might could catch enough fish for supper.
Yeah.
And Johnny and myself both enjoy fish, and I actually asked Kilby, did he care for hay, not for hay, for fish, and he said he liked somewhat. But a lot of people enjoy fish all different kinds of ways. I prefer it fried. I have had it broiled, but it's a lot of different ways.
Yeah, it's a good fish. I like the mahi-mahi or something like that. That's a good fish.
Well, now just for asking this, now it seems to me that it used to be that maybe the Indians and the Pilgrims would take fish and they would use them as fertilizer.
They would. Yeah.
Could you put fish in a compost pile?
And he stumped the horticulture. They say no meat. So I would say no.
Well,
and that's going to leave the bones. You could put it beside because I don't know what nutrient they were putting in the soil.
Right.
I'm the same way. I've seen the pictures of the Indians putting the fish beside the corn. I believe is what they did a lot of times beside the maize that they were planting. It does add fertilizer, and not to say that anything, you know, meat-wise would not add nutrients back, but it just, for a compost pile, it's going to attract
wildlife.
It's going to attract wildlife, coyotes, raccoons, possums, mice. You know, it's going to attract too much of things that we don't want to attract. Is one of the reasons we want to leave that out of the compost pile.
Right.
So, but you're right. I have seen that used before. And going back to the fishing, I know we're getting off the gardening aspect, but I've always said I like to catch fish. Going fishing isn't as fun as catching fish. You know, there's a difference.
That's right. So, you're right. You're exactly right. I had never thought about it, but
I like catching fish.
Catching fish
fishing is not as fun as catching fish.
You know, I don't know the last time that I went fishing, but it's a lot of people that eat, sleep, fish.
Yes.
Eat, sleep, fish. You know, and but
I've got a friend of mine that goes to church, and he'll get up at 2:00 in the morning and get ready and go fishing.
Well, I've got a neighbor that does the same thing, and Johnny, to veer a little bit farther off of the topic at hand, how's it going with your honeybees?
Honeybees are good. We put a super on, probably way later than we should have, but we did put a super on. I was watching the news last night and saw that the hives they have at the news station were really outside the hive quite a bit. And I've noticed ours doing that. In these hot nights, they'll actually come outside of the hive and be right around the entrance of the hive. But they're doing well. Have you been able to
harvest any honey?
We have not, but we didn't really expect to this year. We were just trying to build our hives up and get them, get a healthy hive going through the winter time. So we probably won't put another super on unless that one really does fill up, because I'd like to leave a super on there for the winter time, so they'll have plenty of honey to get them through the winter over there. But thanks for asking. But they're doing well. So far so good. But hopefully next year we'll be able to harvest a little bit of honey from them. But,
the reason I ask, I know I had seen you at a fish fry sometimes back, and y'all was on the way to pick up a hive of bees and things like that.
We've got two hives going now, so they're fun to. It's amazing. You can just sit there and watch bees come and go at the end of the hive. I know that sort of sounds like a boring Saturday night, but it's fairly exciting, really. Well, watching bees work.
And it is interesting, and as we've said before, bees are very important to the pollination, and it's a lot of big companies out there talking about another way to make a living. It's a lot of companies out there that have beehives, and they rent them to different, vegetable growers and orchards and things for pollination. Yeah. And, it is a such thing as some people call it sourwood honey, and it's basically to where the bees have been, enjoying the nectar from sourwood trees. And then if it's bees that are pollinating, strawberry fields, it can be classified as strawberry honey. So it's a lot of different things like that. But
had a bee jubilee down in Granville County back, I guess it was in June, and they had lots of different types of honey that you could taste, and you could pick up some of those different flavors.
Really?
In the honeys back to back.
Honey is very, very nutritional. And local honey is really good for someone that may have allergies, and local honey can help out with that, so I've been told. But anyway, once again, the time has whipped right away from us, and Johnny, I appreciate you coming out and being with us, and thank you for bringing the red wigglers. Next time, bring some.
Just a couple of things to mention that may not have a chance to do next time. But any kind of flowering plants that are flowering now, like a butterfly bush, roses, Some of the spireas that bloom in the summertime, you can deadhead those, get those old blooms off now, and that will help them.
Meaning, go ahead and prune them.
Prune the dead blooms off of them.
Okay.
And that'll encourage them to rebloom for you. You'll still have time for them to rebloom before it gets cold. So that's one point that I wanted to make today, because it is time to start looking at your roses. I saw some of the knockout roses beginning to rebud, and if you'll get those old blooms off, that'll help them to really have a better flush of that next growth of flowers. So something to do in the landscape once it cools off next this
That's right. That's right. Well,
nice.
Johnny, appreciate the information you've shared with us. Thanks goes out to our sponsors, T.G. Brooks Company and South Boston Memorial.